So here we have the layout that you see in the Lab 3 assignment in table format. We're going to start at zero normal form, which is what it's in when you're presented with it to begin with. And so as you see here, we have the order number, order date, customer number, name, and address, and then the items ordered columns that you were given to begin with the data. I thought we put it in Excel here to make it a little bit easier to see. And if you are following along in the textbook with the conditions of the different normal forms, notice that the only condition for zero normal form is that it's in table format, which we are in to begin with. Okay, so I'm going to, at the bottom here as we go through these, I'm going to put the conditions for each of the normal forms just in abbreviated format, just as reminders. So hopefully you can watch these videos over and over if you need to in order to understand why we are making certain design decisions here, and hopefully it will make it easier to understand. A lot of this stuff that we're going through is very detailed. You have to kind of really think about why we are moving attributes into different tables and things like that. We're going through it in a structured manner, and so which will always give you, a good design. But the more you do it, the more intuitive this will become, the more sense it will make to you. So you won't have to go through this same detailed procedure and thought process every time. You'll begin to think in terms of 3NF for the most part, so that when you're designing something, you kind of automatically put things into the right table and format and think about the right key fields. But I understand that that's foreign to most folks, especially if you've never designed databases before. So hopefully this will give you a step-by-step of how to get there, and then through practice you'll get much better at it. All right, so the first thing here is we want to move sequentially through the normal forms. We'll do it step by step because it'll make more sense that way. So we're in zero normal form here, and we want to move to first normal form. Now, there's actually two conditions for first normal form, and that is that you can't have any repeating groups and that you have to identify a primary key, and both of which are presenting a problem with how this data is given to you. So I decided to do that to tackle first normal form in two steps. So the first thing is, well, before I do that, let me go over here. I've got an ERD for each of these as well. So here we are as an ERD in our zero normal form, all of our attributes, and I've actually got the primary key, which is not correct. We haven't identified a primary key just yet. But so the first step here is that we have to eliminate repeating groups. So if we take a look at the data, we have to ask ourselves, do we see a repeating group? The answer is yes, of course, over here in items ordered, because each line here, each record in the file, the customer is ordering multiple items. So I know this is kind of hard to understand, but you have the quantity of 5 in this first record, right? They've ordered 5 of this item. The item number is 1A4536, and then flange is the description for the item. 7 pounds is the weight, and the extent is 75. That is that it costs $75 for 5 of them, right? So the unit price would be 15. We'll get to that later. But then they also ordered 4 of this item, and then 4 of this item, and so on and so forth. So that's a repeating group, right? That violates first normal form, so we have to fix that. And the way that we fix it is essentially breaking it up into its own records. So notice here how we've got 4 records. Well, here is the first step in first normal form. So what I've done is exploded that out and created a record for each of the items that the customer has ordered on each order. So for example, notice here in the first column I have 4 order number 100s, right? Because there were 4 lines on that order. The customer ordered 4 different items in 4 different quantities, right, with different prices, etc. So by exploding that into its own record, I have essentially fixed the repeating group. Now I could just have as many records as I want tied to that same order, and it's not a repeating group anymore, okay? Now eventually we're going to separate these out into their own columns, right? But another way of doing this, even if you had multiple columns in the same table where you had item 1, item 2, item 3, that would still be a repeating group. So whether or not it's in the same attribute or spread out among several attributes, it's still a repeating group and still has to be fixed. And the way that you fix it is to explode it into its own record. But also notice that since we've done that, we've had to repeat several attributes here. That is order number, order date, customer number, name, and address. Repeat. That's okay for now. We're going to fix that later, but that alone does not violate first normal form. So again, we're taking this stepwise to make it simpler. The next step is to define a primary key. Now, the thing with a primary key is it has to uniquely identify a single record. In other words, you can't have a primary key that duplicates. So when we look at this table, our obvious choice would be order number, except that, well, they duplicate, so it doesn't really meet the criteria for that. But one of the tricks in forming a primary key is that it doesn't just have to consist of a single attribute. I can use more than one attribute together to form what we call a compound primary key, and as long as the combination of those fields uniquely identify a record, then that's perfectly fine. So what are our other candidate keys? Maybe customer number? Well, unfortunately, those are going to repeat too. So if we look at order number and customer number here, even for these 4 records, they still repeat, duplicate, so that won't work. The same thing with customer name and address. And by the way, text fields make terrible keys, so usually you want to pick something like a number and identifier as a key field. Those work a lot better. But if we look over here in items ordered, notice that the item number does not duplicate, right? Because, well, if they ordered 2 of the same item, it'd be the same record. You just increase the quantity, right? So you're never going to have 2 with the same here. So item number actually makes a pretty good primary key in combination with the order. You couldn't just use item because different customers are going to order the same item. For example, look at this one, right? But actually, that's not the same one. Excuse me. Some of these are duplicated down through here, but even if they aren't, they could be, right? Customer could order the same item, of course. Well, we hope that happens. So item number alone would be insufficient to establish uniqueness. So would order number. But if we put them together, like I've done here, order number and item number as the primary key, notice how there are no duplicates. Order number duplicates, and item number duplicates, right? But the combination of order number and item number do not duplicate. They're unique. So it uniquely identifies a record. So here again are the conditions for first normal form. No repeating groups and a primary key identified. I'm shading the primary keys in blue here in Excel just to make that obvious. Okay. And so let me go over here and I'm going to show you first normal form here. We've still got a single table. We'll fix that in a few minutes. And then we have identified order number and item number as our primary key, and then we still have the other attributes.